My name is Wally Main. I'm a civil engineer, and I used to work for the Johannesburg City Council, and I took advantage of their subsidized education scheme. So as a bursar, I received my BSc Engineering in Civil, and then I did an MBA through them, as well as an MSc in Civil Engineering. So those are my qualifications. I spent roughly 30 years in urban engineering, working for the Johannesburg City Council, and since then I spent a few years at the Water Institute of Southern Africa, and now I'm with Consulting Engineers South Africa. CESA plays a very important role in developing consulting engineers as a profession. CESA, Consulting Engineers South Africa, is a voluntary association, organization. It has 520 member firms. That's quite important because usually voluntary associations consists of or has a membership of individual people. This is firms. So we have a commercial emphasis because firms are in the business of consulting engineering. So as a membership organization for consulting engineering firms, CESA's role in advancing the profession is really to see to the integrity of the member firms, to see to their competence, and to see that they perform for the clients. So CESA is not only about the member firms as such, but it's also about safeguarding the relationship between member firms and the clients. And to do this, we have very strict membership requirements. So as it were, we register consulting engineering firms informally and through reputation. We have strict requirements like half the firm must be owned by professional engineers or technologists. Each firm must have professional indemnity insurance. They have to be properly registered with CESA. They have to have a quality management system, and they have to adopt the sustainability framework that we recommend. And perhaps most importantly, they have to adopt our code of conduct, which is an ethical code, and what it does is it gives clients a recourse. If for instance, one of the member firms doesn't behave ethically in fulfilling an assignment with the client, that client then has recourse to CESA, and CESA can then investigate and discipline the firm if necessary. So at least they have some recourse. The key areas of a consulting engineer are really the planning, design, and monitoring of infrastructure projects. Or if it's a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, of a transformer or firefighting system, something like that. But whatever it is, the engineers apply the principles of science and actually take it from principles of science to some physical entity, and they provide the method, as it were. So the contractors would build the project, and the consulting engineers would do the feasibility studies, the preliminary designs, the liaison with the clients, etc. They would then provide working drawings, detailed design and working drawings, and then they would assist the client in appointing a competent contractor to then turn that design into reality. And they would, during the construction process, monitor the construction, quality testing, and so forth. So they would really act in the client's interests. Interesting point is that the consulting engineer, as the designer, is liable for his or her design for the life of that project. So it's a huge liability, which sometimes the clients don't realize. But that's just a point of interest. I think the overriding principle is the principle of safety. The Engineering Council of South Africa was established as a statutory body, primarily to see to the safety of the public, and that's why they register engineers and so forth as competent, right? But so the principles involved across all three is the major one is safety. You must see to the safety of the public. I mean, if a bridge fails, that's 500 people gone, whatever. So you have to, it might not be as dramatic as that. So that's the first one, is the safety one. The second one is to see that the design or the end product, infrastructure, lives up to its purpose. So it must fulfill its purpose. And then a third one is that it should be an optimal design. So there's many ways to just say build a bridge. For instance, you could build a massive bridge with a lot of concrete and steel with very little design work, because you know that's a safe bridge and it'll do the job. But really you want to save the client money as well. So you want to redesign a few times, process of iteration, looking at the design, reducing weights and amount of concrete and so forth, looking at the forces, and coming up with an optimal design, which will be strong enough to do the job and not cost as much money, and essentially to act in the interests of the client as well as the public. So those are some of the principles. I mean, there are many others. Engineers, we always double check our work. So you must double check your calculations, perhaps use an alternative method so that you don't make the same mistake over, that you do check the calculations. There's an expression, I think it's called KISS, keep it simple, stupid, you know, or junk in is junk out, something like that, where people rely too much on software, and they'll just put the forces, the weights, the dimensions into the software, and it spits out an answer, and they accept it. And often, or not often, but on occasion it's incorrect, and failures happen. Engineers must know the basics of design, look to their basic principles, and just check that whatever the computer spits out is reasonable and plausible and will do the job. In overseeing a project, this is why in the old terminology it used to be called an engineer would plan, design and supervise. But supervise has got an active element in it. Whereas these days they talk about planning, designing and monitoring. It's not the engineer's role to tell the contractor how to go about the construction of a project, of certain infrastructure. It's the engineer's role to see that the contractor is doing a proper job. So the engineer cannot, as in the word supervise, cannot instruct a contractor how to build something or to erect something. The engineer will then see to the quality testing, point out deficiencies, potential failures. So, for instance, if they're building a road, the engineer will see that the compaction of the road is properly tested at certain intervals according to the contract. And the other part, which is not really part of monitoring or oversight, is where the engineer is called upon to remedy design errors or problems with the site encountered, and then they have to get a redesign perhaps for part of the project and so forth, but that's not really part of oversight. So an engineer's role in oversight would be to attend weekly site meetings, to walk around the site to see what's going on, and also to liaise with the resident engineer. They have a resident engineer on bigger projects full-time on site, so that resident engineer can see what's happening as for instance, say a building is being constructed. If the engineer is only called on to visit the site every 2 weeks, then there's going to be many instances where the steel has already been encased in concrete or so forth. So, and he cannot see the quality of the workmanship and cannot check. That's why often you have a resident engineer full-time on site to monitor things as they go along. Sustainability in consulting engineering, I think, means that whatever the engineer does is not to the detriment of future generations. In other words, that infrastructure is sustainable and it will sustain its surrounding environment. Part of sustainability originates early on in a design. For instance, at the stage of a feasibility study. And I think sustainability goes about considering the whole project, the project as a whole. So how will it be constructed? How will it be operated? And what will happen to it at the end of its life period? Okay. So take a landfill, okay, which is something I have experience of, right? So when you design it, you have to get it licensed, etc. So when you design it, so a landfill is a collection of refuse, and so when water filters through it, like rainwater, it develops leachate, which is like the runoff, but it's highly poisonous and toxic, etc. So in the interests of sustainability and the environment, you then design for that. You don't hide it, you design for it, and you put in drainage systems, collection points, and so forth. All right? Or you design it so that it doesn't seep through into the groundwater. So often these landfills are built, for instance, in old clay quarries, brick fields, or they're lined with plastic membranes and so forth. But they're also drained, designed to be drained, and the leachate to be treated, etc., which maybe is the better way to go. And then when it's operated, there are strict but you design the operating system. So you ensure that the refuse is compacted and covered with earth every day. You ensure that the embankments are grassed, so the landfill doesn't wash away. And then looking at the design phase now, still, when you're thinking about this landfill, you think, now what will be the end use? So maybe it's going to become a playing field or something. So you design a beneficial use into the product. And you take that same philosophy through everything that comes out of the design office. Okay. Another example that comes to mind of engineering sustainability is the commercial viability of a project. So, and here it's the famous triple Ps, public-private partnerships, where a private investor will invest the money and get their return over a number of years, and have provided a facility for the community, such as a wastewater treatment plant. And so the investor invests the money and sees to the construction of a plant, and after 30 years or something will have recovered that investment and a profit from the community, who pay a tariff for their wastewater and so forth. So that's looking at a project, seeing how it's going to operate, and making sure it's not going to be abandoned as a white elephant or something, as often is the case with government funding. But really what I'm trying to say is that when you look at a project, any project, in a holistic manner, that's taking care or taking into account the principles of sustainability, because that project needs to be sustainable over its life period and even beyond. Another aspect of sustainability is in terms of this holistic design, and you consider say a wastewater treatment works, right? So say it's a small rural community that you're designing for. As a designer, you wouldn't go there and put a state-of-the-art electrify with major mechanical equipment and aerators and whatever, filters and dosing plants, etc., in that situation. Okay, you would go back to basics, and perhaps what did they do in the early days? They had a pond system. So you would institute or design a filtration pond system for that, and perhaps introduce a reed bed for the polishing of the effluent. So when one does a holistic or sustainable design, one takes into account the operating cost as well, and what is suitable for that environment. So if it's a city situation, then a compact wastewater treatment plant, highly automated, etc., is justifiable. But in a rural environment where population density is very low, then you would go back to more natural methods, less mechanical and perhaps labor intensive. That's all part of sustainability, of looking at the whole picture and taking all the factors into account. If for instance, you're designing for a rural area that you know, or you're told that it will become a high density, say, city type area in future, it's at least you know it, so you can design for it. And there you could perhaps design a modular system, also say mechanical, whatever, because they are more efficient and can treat higher volumes of wastewater. You design such a system, but in a modular format, and for that small community at the moment, you would just build the first module, and you would have to bring electricity and other services to the site, but you would have to anyway. So you could do it in that sense, and there you are considering the whole picture, because you now have been told the end situation, and you can design for it. For me, a sustainability strategy sort of swings both ways. It might be for a consulting engineering firm, their policy on how to deal with sustainability going forward. Or it might be for a project, or a particular project, maybe say a new steel works or something, set up front by the client, saying this is our sustainability strategy. So the client might have certain criteria, sustainability related criteria, that have to be adhered to as part of the client's sustainability strategy for the project. And it's easier if you just say plan instead of strategy. So the strategy, the sustainability plan for a consulting engineering firm might be, here are the guidelines. When you evaluate a project, make sure you answer all these questions, etc. If it's a highly environmental site, sensitive site, okay, go and study this and this legislation and adopt these, for that situation, adopt these measures, okay, stuff like that. So if you're building a road through an environmentally sensitive area, like in the Eastern Cape, then take measures to make sure that you damage as little of the environment as possible, that you store the topsoil and replace it, you store the plants that have been displaced and plant them in the area. So that you take measures to fulfill the principles of sustainability. So that is from a design office point of view, that you build those measures into your design, and you take account of them in reaching your design. If it's from a client's point of view, and they've got a sustainability plan, I think the primary thing would be to discuss it with the client and see just how valid their requirements are and if they can be accommodated or not. I think the first one, where it's in the firm, sustainability plan within a firm, is it's more a case of discipline and following guidelines and thinking of all the possibilities and eventualities. In the second case, where it's a client-imposed strategy, then it's a matter of testing that client, testing that strategy, because your design will have to meet that strategy and meet that plan. CESA is very keen on this idea. It's very enthusiastic about making sure, as far as it can, that its member firms treat clients with respect and fulfill their assignments to the letter and beyond. And how we attempt to do this is by insisting on top quality firms, by ensuring that only top quality firms join CESA. So I might have mentioned it earlier, we ensure that half the ownership at least is by professional engineers or technologists. Okay. Why that's important is because, just a silly thing is really that you know that firm is about engineering because it's owned by engineers. And secondly, the fact that it's by registered engineers means that they've been judged competent in their field of expertise, their areas of expertise, by the Engineering Council of South Africa, which means they've got acceptable qualifications and they've got acceptable experience. and that they, if that particular engineer does the work for which he or she has been registered, then it will be a safe product, a safe design. Inefficient design, so that's one of the ways we do it. Then we also ask our member firms to implement a quality management system, which introduces structure and ensures to a large extent that the client will receive a quality design in product. If the member firm doesn't fulfill its requirement to the client's satisfaction, then if it's a contractual issue, then the client and the member firm must sort it out themselves. CESA has no mandate to get involved in contractual issues because the client and the member firm have signed a contract and there's no room for a third party there. Right? So there's nothing we can do about contractual complaints. But if it's an ethical complaint, they can comply to us. They can approach us and complain to us. They can approach us, and CESA will then evaluate that complaint in terms of its code of conduct. And if the member firm has breached the code of conduct, then there are some penalties that CESA can apply, such as suspending the member or terminating its membership, or terminating membership and publishing it in the newspapers, which is really a terrible punishment for a firm. So there's that. The other thing we do to try and prevent that is to recommend and insist, as far as we can, that clients and member firms sign a contract which covers for most eventualities, and it's got performance criteria built into it. So we actually sell a lot of contract documents, some just for general construction, but others for client consultant relationships or assignments, contracts, and those we really recommend. We do not recommend any handshake contracts because, as you know, a contract is there for when things go wrong. Yeah. So those are the two measures. We make sure there's a contract as far as we can, and we do take up contraventions of the code of conduct. The one that guides specifically engineering conduct and competencies and so forth is the Engineering Professions Act of about 1990 or something. Yeah, okay, so there's that, right? There's the Engineering Professions Act. But otherwise, there's not a lot of regulation on engineers specifically. So apart from that act, there's no requirement that member firms or firms, consulting engineering firms, register as such with anybody and get a license to practice, as it were. What the Engineering Council does is it licenses or registers individual engineers, and then they can practice. They can do that particular work and so forth, and then they work within the firms. But there's no onus on a firm to register as such. But which is, so CESA actually at the moment is fulfilling that role. So if you want a good consulting engineering firm, employ a CESA member firm, because you know that half the ownership is professional engineers, that they have a professional indemnity insurance cover, that they have a quality management system, that they have a code of conduct. The other thing is that they've been in business for at least a year. And they've also been recommended by 2 of their peers. So 2 existing members must recommend a firm before they can apply. So we are actually unofficially fulfilling that role of registration of firms. Okay. You see, the Engineering Profession Act, if I can just quickly digress, it says engineers can only do the work. Engineers only can do work for which they are qualified. Okay, so it's like saying only doctors can practice medicine. Okay, but the work itself is not explained in the legislation. So, okay, it's fine. Only engineers can do this work, but what is that work? It's not defined in legislation yet. It's called, it's a huge principle. It's on at the moment, the whole debate. And it's been going on for like maybe 10 years. So, see, that's the other half of the legislation. People can only be punished. Say a bricklayer designs a bridge. Okay, a bricklayer is clearly not qualified to design the bridge in terms of the law. They haven't done engineering, they're not registered. Okay, but the bricklayer can build a bridge, build a bridge, without fear, provided it doesn't fall down. Okay, so that's the thing. So half the legislation is there that says only an engineer can do a bridge. Okay, but the other half that says what is only an engineer can do this work. Right. The other half of the legislation that's missing, it says that work is a bridge, etc. You know, you need both to give full effect to the act, and that's called identification of work. And at the moment, for engineers, it's sitting with. It went through the Council of Built Environment, and it's sitting with the Competitions Board, because Competitions Board's got to say, no, well, you're reserving all this work for yourselves. It's anti-competitive. And we're trying to say it's a matter of safety. You know, if you say only surgeons can operate on your ankles, is that anti-competitive? Or if you say only engineers can design bridges, is that anti-competitive? So yeah, so anyway, that's the Engineering Professions Act. So it hasn't been given its teeth yet until the Competitions Board says, no, that's fine, you know, then can be gazetted, and then you'll see many more prosecutions of unqualified people performing engineering work. And it goes for the architects and all the other disciplines as well. They can just go to our website, www.cesa.co.za, and click on how to become a member, and just follow the steps. Otherwise, they can phone us, 011-463-2022. Speak to Gillian, and she will send you all the documentation. But basically, it's to show that you fulfill those requirements. Half owned by engineers, you're registered with CESA, a proper company, that you have a professional indemnity insurance, you follow a quality management system, you've been in business for a year, and 2 of the members have recommended you for membership. And we're very strict about it. We do checks and so forth. Yeah, we check, for instance, the professional engineers you've listed, are they professional engineers? The jobs you put down, say you're claiming to be a structural engineer, but the CVs show you've only worked on wastewater treatment or roads or something, you know, then we'll write back to you and say, no, we need more evidence of structural engineering. So it's a thorough process, and then we have a membership committee which then meets Gillian sees that you've submitted all the information, okay, and then she prepares a pack, and that goes to the membership committee, who then approve it or not, or call for more documentation. And once it's approved, it then goes to the members. It gets circulated to the members for a period of 2 weeks or so. And if anyone's got any objections, they must write. And if they haven't, then we put up a report to our board, and they approve that membership. So it's a thorough process, and it's because you know, we want to guarantee as far as we can to the clients that CESA members are value for money and, you know, fit for purpose. And public sector clients, where about 2/3 of our work comes from, shouldn't really say CESA members only will be considered, but they can say member firms must belong to a recognized association, because there is another association called SEPTACO, South African Black Technical and Allied Careers Organization, and so tenderers should belong to either of them. Or what a client can say is to put those criteria into their request for proposals, their tender document, to say that half the firm must be owned by professional engineers, etc., which is a subtle way of ensuring that you get a quality service provider. Because, you know, when it's thrown open so wide, people can claim, anybody can claim anything, and it's very difficult for a lonely soul at a municipality to now check, if they've got maybe 200 tenders, now check on the qualifications of everyone. Whereas if they know that they're CESA members, and they can check with us, and they can just go to our website and see if they're there or not. I think in practice, a lot of clients are kind of insisting on CESA membership because many, I think certainly in the private sector, because many of our applications are rushed because they want membership before they submit a tender. So it's good for us and it's good for the clients because they're getting better quality firms and our membership is growing. Look, we've got 520 firms at the moment, right? What keeps them in good standing is if they pay their fees, obviously. That we don't hear negative reports about them. And I think good standing with us, you know, that's really all we do. You know, if we hear negative stuff about them and that. It's a smallish industry, so you fairly soon hear if someone's in disrepute. Well, it's really the reverse of the previous question, but if they don't pay their dues to us, that compromises their standing. Yeah, and I think if there are complaints about them, if it's a contractual complaint, you know, we don't really take that as a negative about the firm, because it takes two to argue, and we're not in the court, we're not a judicial body, so we don't know who's right and who's wrong, etc. You must take your contract, go to a court or wherever and sort it out. So that kind of thing could compromise a member's standing. What does compromise their standing, if they get found guilty of misconduct by the Engineering Council of South Africa, if their staff gets found guilty, then we take action as well. For instance, if it's a one-man band and that person, the owner, is found guilty of misconduct by the Engineering Council of South Africa, you know, then we'll look into it as well, because we can't have a dishonoured firm, in our membership. So that's where we take that. Just out of interest, what we do is we maintain a list of reputable experts, arbitrators, mediators, and adjudicators. If someone, like some documents will say, contract documents will say, that the president of CESA must appoint an arbitrator or something, a mediator, and then we appoint from that list. Or anyone can just go to that list, which is on our website, and two parties and agree on someone. Or if they can't agree, they can write to us and ask us to appoint someone, which does happen, yeah. And it's a cheaper form of dispute resolution, yeah. In terms of business management, CESA has developed a year-long course called the Business of Consulting Engineering, BCE. It's like a mini MBA. It's got 3 one-week blocks spread through the year. That's intensive 5 days in our training center by various subject experts. And then I think it's 40 or so assignments during the year. And what it does is it doesn't teach engineering per se. It teaches the business of running a consulting engineering firm. It's in its, I think it's in its 3rd year now. And we can only do a maximum of 20 students at a time. It's highly computerized and linked, and assignments and whatever. So, and it's quite expensive. But the member firms send their students on it who they've identified as up-and-coming young engineers. And the students who've successfully completed it, I think about 99% do, are all rising rapidly up the ranks in their firms. So that's as far as business management goes. We do have a training center here. It's called the School of Consulting Engineering. It has 3 classrooms. And what we do is we have some courses that we've developed ourselves in quality management and so on, and procurement. We also have courses like the project management and so forth, even Excel and report writing, where we identify a trainer and their material, and then we outsource the trainer and material, and we provide the venue, the refreshments and all that. When we do the invoicing, we do the advertising, everything. So all we outsource is the trainer and the material. So we've got a number of courses like that. So we are trying to advance, keep our members educated. We also have breakfast seminars on topical issues like the construction sector charter, risk management and awareness. So those kind of courses. We also have an annual conference called the CESA Infrastructure Conference. And then the other, we have awards, which is nice, a very nice evening, where we recognize brilliant projects that our firms have worked on, and we recognize the clients as well for those projects for the past year. So. I think it's not only seen by CESA but generally recognized is that mentoring and coaching. So it's well recognized. We do recognize it. We made an effort there so that firms will be aware of it, be conscious of this need. But there are many young graduates from technical universities, wherever, who just can't get their practical experience. And then when they do, they don't get the right kind of experience where they can register as professionals. Okay, so we have, in conjunction with the CETA, the Construction Education and Training Authority, and SEPTACO, got a joint venture where I think we started off at 150 candidates. We're down to 100 now, because some have registered, but where they're placed with our firms and put on a proper progression of experience to reaching registration, and the CETA funds that exercise. Yeah, so we see it as critical. Yeah. Because without it, you know, our profession, you probably hear it from a lot of sources, is an aging profession. There's quite a serious gap of experienced engineers coming up, okay? Because as we retire, so that we need replacements. And without that experience, we won't be able to fill the gap. Those young graduates will never become professional engineers, or if they do, they won't be very good professional engineers. You need the experience, so that's why we really believe in that, and you can just see it from the emails you get, and yeah. So it used to be a case of not enough graduates coming out of university or school or whatever, proficient in science and maths, but now they're out here, but they need to be given the experience, the opportunity, on-the-job training to become valuable engineers. Yeah, because without training, you only know the theory, so you're only qualified to teach. Yeah. So just to say that with this competitive bidding and tendering for work, you know, it's and because there's not enough work to go around, it's really given rise to almost an evil, and that is discounting amongst the firms. They're competing so actively for work that they're really lowering their prices to the point of there's no profit in it. And what that has done, sort of like a hidden, whatever you call it, what do you call it? A hidden result, a side effect. But anyway,
consequence?
Yeah, hidden consequence is that, or unforeseen consequence, is that there's been no sort of surplus funds in the sector to take on young people and train them. Because if you take on a young person and you've still got to train them, that's a cost to the company, and someone's got to pay for it. And companies are not keen to pay for it out of, you know, when you're not making any money on the job anyway and you've discounted it, where are you going to find money to train these young people? So that is part of the reason why these young graduates are not getting trained. Very sad.